Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the Dieter Melhorn Fishing Podcast. I hope you're having a good day, whatever day it is that you happen to be listening to the show. If you're a regular listener or someone who watches regularly on YouTube, welcome back. Appreciate you sticking with the show here. And if you're new, hey, thanks for dropping by. Thanks for checking it out. We're on all the popular social media platforms out there, all the popular podcast platforms, and you can watch this podcast on YouTube. If you want to reach out to me, give me some feedback, give me some ideas, book a guide trip, whatever, go to the website, DieterMelhornFishing.com. And that has links to everything on there. Whether you're watching, listening, you can figure out how to get back and forth to those things. And there's also contact information on there on how to get a hold of me. Yes, I do guided fishing trips here in the Carolinas, mainly on the Catawba River chain of lakes. So, yeah, in this area, if you're ever in the area and want to fish, hit me up. We will go. Today, we're going to talk about spring catfishing and catching spring catfish and what is going on right now out there. You know, based on what I've seen, what typically happens and what most people, you know, can kind of expect. You know, as it warms up, people want to get outside. And, you know, a lot of you guys, certain parts of the country, man, you don't get to get out much in the wintertime unless you're snowmobiling or ice fishing. So, you know, this is a welcome change in the temperatures. And, you know, listen, even here where we get to fish year round, it's nice to see things warm up. It's nice to not have to bundle up and be cold every morning when you go out and, you know, hope for sunshine during the day. But, you know, we don't flip a switch generally and go from winter to spring. Generally, there's a little bit of an up and down, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about first is, you know, some of the ups and downs. I call it the Yo-Yo Effect. I've done some videos on my YouTube channel kind of talking about this, alluding to this, and it's a, you know, it's good one day, it's bad the next, or it may be good for a few days and it slows back down. You know, this is really start to see this. People really start to get fired up. You know, a lot of times in March, we'll have a warm streak, a really warm streak in March, and it's like, man, spring's here. And then next thing you know, boom, bottom drops out on the temperatures. It gets cold. What little bit of a good bite was starting, slams shut. And, you know, you're back down again trying to claw your way out of those colder temperatures. And, you know, by the taping and airing of this, it's going to be mid-April. So it's a little bit, we're into kind of what I call the good zone. One of the things I've talked about in some of these YouTube videos is, you know, hitting that magic mark to where that temperature, that water temperature starts to hold above 60 degrees. At least for us in the southeast, over much of the country, that 60-degree mark is kind of like a magic number, especially when it comes to flatheads waking up and moving, blues starting to really feed aggressively pre-spawn. And even the channel cats, they're starting to show up. So I always tell, my rule of thumb is if you look at your almanac, or any of you folks that are gardeners, farmers out there, you've got that last freeze date. It's kind of that historical date at which there's not going to be any more freezes or frosts. Varies depending on where you're at in the country. Further north you go, the later that is. Where I'm at, it's around April 15th. And I've always used that as kind of a little benchmark. You know, pretty much after that, the fishing is pretty consistent in relationship to the water temperature. You know, before that, you know, if it's, you know, March 25th and it gets warm and that water temperature is climbing up there, you know, above 60 degrees, and you're like, man, it's getting ready to happen. You know, crappie are going to the bank. They're going to be spawning here in a week. The flatheads are going to be waking up. Inevitably, you get one of those cold snaps that happens. And, you know, we always laugh about it. It's like, it's coming. It's coming. It's going to happen. And, you know, we had it this year. You know, and that leads to that up and down kind of yo-yo effect with what's going on. Here where we're at now, mid-April, things are starting to trend, you know, in a good upward direction. I have not seen water temperatures drop back below 60. So they're kind of holding above it. I doubt that they will. Another thing you can look at just, you know, data-wise out there that's readily available is what the average temperature is, the daily mean temperature. I've talked about that before. You go to the NOAA website, and for your area, they'll usually give you the data or sometimes they put it on the weather radio. They'll, the average mean temperature was whatever. That's basically your average between, your highs and your lows and how that, translates out over, a day. And that usually is pretty close to what your surface temperatures are on the water. So as you see that start to go up, and there's all kinds of charts and stuff that track this historically, it gives you something to kind of look at, aim for, hope for, wait for. And I say all that to say that not everybody has as much time to fish as I do. They're not on the water as much. Their life is not built around it. So they have to pick and choose, when they're going to try to maybe plan a vacation, plan some days off. And knowing kind of when this is going to happen can help people out. So that's why I kind of throw all this out there for you guys to kind of keep in mind. For me, it's second nature, man. I'm just, I meet up with fishing. It's a lifestyle. It's 24/7. The wheels are turning about something all the time. And that's just one of the little cogs in the wheel there is just, what's going on water temperature wise. But, another thing that comes into play there when it comes to ups and downs and the yo-yo effect is the spring rains and fronts that we get coming through. It's a time of the year when you get a lot of volatility with stuff moving in. Across the south, you'll see these lines of tornadoes. A lot of you guys have been hit by these things. God bless you. There's been some people who've had their homes and towns tore apart. And, you get some violent weather. You get some heavy rain sometimes that's come in. We've had that already this year. And those rains can lead to big rises in rivers and lakes. And on the rising water, when the water's coming in, it can be some good fishing. A couple of weeks ago, we had a front coming through, brought a lot of rain, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of rain. And leading up to it, coming into it, when the water's rising, it's good fishing. But as our lakes got to full pond, which is basically the full point on them, and they started dropping them, one, we had a lot of mud coming through, which in a reservoir I think has a different effect than some of you guys in a river where it's kind of constantly stained. But that water started dropping, and they try to drop it quickly, so they're in position to accommodate the next front that comes through with the weather. And man, this will put the brakes on some fishing. It will put a halt on the bite. Not everywhere, not totally, but it makes fishing difficult when they start dropping water like that. And you get a bad combination of falling water, muddy water, which that also changes the pH and everything else in the water. And a lot of times with these fronts that come through, you'll get a drop in the water temperature. You've got this cold rain, that influx of cold water. It's a bad combination. I actually reached out to several people I had guide trips planned with and said, hey, it's getting bad. It's probably going to get worse. Do you want to reschedule? And several of them we rescheduled. Now, the good news is that generally speaking, on the back side of these, the recovery time is not as bad as it is like in the wintertime. When you have one of these events in the wintertime, it could put the brakes on some fishing for a while because you've got already cold, water temperatures, and then you're going to have this rain event happen, and it can really make things tough for a while. Whereas in the spring, it's like healing when you're old. Healing when you're old takes a little longer. Healing when you're young, spring chicken, it's kind of quick. And that's kind of what we've experienced over the last couple of weeks has been that, we had that rain event and, that happened. Water dropped, water got kind of clear. Water temperatures are back in the low to mid 60s. The bite has been phenomenal for the past 4 trips that we've been running this week. So, that's the ups and downs that you kind of have to pay attention to. And, it's just, the thing with the spring. Keep an eye on the weather. You got to watch the weather in the springtime. Kind of as a fisherman and angler, you're kind of watching it all the time. But, especially, in the springtime, it makes a difference. And now, any of you guys that watch a lot of videos, the YouTube videos on the YouTube channel, will know that past several years, I have been using chicken a lot as bait. We're going to kind of talk about some of the bait strategies here in the spring. And yes, I have used chicken. I still use chicken. I will continue to use chicken. Pardon me as I dig a pen out here in my pocket or my cup. But springtime is when I make the switch over to cut bait. Now, I've still got some on the boat, still got it in the cooler, but it seems like my theory on all this is, and don't get me wrong, you can cut bait works any time of the year, period. But there are some circumstances that are a little bit different in the way I fish in the springtime. A lot of times I'm anchored up in places and not drifting, covering water. And a lot of times these places I'm anchored up, especially when those temperatures get above 60 degrees, I'm kind of looking for flatheads. We've got flatheads in our reservoirs here. I like to catch them. They're fun fish. They're just that beautifully ugly fish that everybody wants to catch and everybody likes to, put their hands on. I had a guy today on a guide trip. We went out targeting them. First fish in the boat, had a nice flathead, 20-pound range. First flathead he's ever caught, only one he's ever caught before. So it was automatically a personal best flathead, but it was also great for him to see it and, hold it, see how, their mouths are. If you haven't caught flatheads before, they're kind of unique, and in one, just the shape of their body and the way they're built. Their fins really don't poke you, unlike, other catfish that have, kind of sharp spines on them. Flatheads a lot less likely to poke you, and they have very little crushing power. They have a huge mouth. You can put a basketball in it, but the crushing power of the mouth is nowhere near as bad as the blue, which has torn these thumbs and fingers up as I was stupid picking them up. But anyway, I digress. The flatheads are what I'm targeting. A lot of times that means anchoring up near some kind of structure and, some type of change, whether it be, a pier, the supports on a pier, a pile of rocks, a steep drop, a rock bluff or rock pile, even some brush piles that crappie fishermen put out. You will find these flatheads around those areas. And we don't have great numbers of them. So I think you're better off anchoring up. And that's why I anchor up in a lot of these places. And is why I use cut bait over the chicken, because my thinking is that most of these fish that are feeding on chicken are feeding in areas where they're feeding on mussels. So sometimes those places are not always the same. So that's why I go with cut bait more this time of the year. Now, with that said, the past 2 trips, we have been anchoring up early, fishing, catching flatheads, and then as the bite started to wane and these fish moved off into deeper water, we went to drifting, and we put chicken out on half and cut bait on half. And ironically, the biggest fish on both the trips ended up coming on chicken once we started drifting. But I just say all that to say that I use the cut bait a lot more this time of the year. You'll see a lot more in the videos as you start watching. I just think these fish are aggressively feeding. They're feeding, let's face it, big fish feed on fish. And even medium-sized catfish feed on fish. And that's where most of their diet and their food comes from. Why are we not fishing live bait? Well, you can fish live bait if you want to. Most of the fish that they're eating out there are alive. Catfish don't have a fillet knife, so they don't eat fillets typically. The only ones they're getting as far as fillets, cut bait, chunks, and all that stuff is what we cut off and give to them. So, it's natural for them to eat fish. The downside to using fish is, one, live fish is, instead of getting 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of bait, you've got 1 piece. Now, if you've got a real abundance of live bait, go for it. Do what you want to. But it just gives you more options on the bait. The other thing is you really need those baits moving and somewhat active to bring fish in compared to the cut bait, which is going to spread scent because it's opened up so that the fluids and stuff are into the water, and it helps create a little more of a scent trail, a little more for the fish to key in on. But that's the biggest reason we use. A lot of people swear by cut bait, and I do use it. I have put it out on some trips. I actually taped a video the other day where I had cut live bait out. Side by side with cut bait, and we never caught a fish on it. I think yesterday's guide trip I may put a live bait out, and we ended up catching a nice blue on it. But it's I like going with some type of fish this time of year, and that can be whatever you've got in your waters. If you've got skipjack where you're at, go with that. If you've got gizzard shad, if you can use game fish like bluegill, crappie, bass, any of that'll work. If you've got Asian carp where you're at, use those things. They're great for bait. So springtime, I like upsizing the bait a little bit, especially now as it starts to warm. I think some of these flatheads are a little more aggressive in their feeding patterns, and I think it's a good time to go with it. Now, what about stink bait? Some of you guys are not, really hardcore into chasing catfish and catching them. And, you may not have access to cut bait and be able to throw a cast in, or depending on where you're fishing, maybe you don't have time. So some of the stink bait manufactured baits. Honestly, I don't think our temperatures are to where they need to be yet. I think that stuff works better once you get into some 70-degree water. And I may be totally wrong on this and totally off base, but the people I know that use it seem to do better in the summertime with it once it warms up. Now, it is a big magnet for channel catfish. You will catch a lot more channel catfish on it. Blues will hit it. Flatheads a lot less likely. It's just like with the chicken. Blues and channels are a lot more likely to hit chicken than flatheads are, and I think that's because flatheads don't feed on that many mussels and aquatic snails and that kind of stuff as blues and channels do. And I think the stingbait, for whatever reason, I think it's just not something, if you're trying to catch flathead, that I would be going with. Plus, I'd wait, give it until maybe June, until we get above 70 degrees, not June, but later in April into May, temperatures are going to be warming up. If you're wanting to use that stuff, give it a shot then once it warms up a little bit. So, what should you avoid this time of the year? The biggest thing is, honestly, from what I've seen right now, and this is not true everywhere, but deep water. I know everybody has the tendency to want to go to the deepest part of the place you're fishing. And maybe in some places where there's a lot of river current and you're looking for deep holes that fish can duck out of stuff, that may come into play. But in areas where it's not really swift current, if you're on lakes or reservoirs, there's a lot of catfish being caught near the bank. And, within casting distance of somebody that's fishing on the bank. And, this is for a lot of reasons. One, that water's warming up quicker. Two, you've got a lot of bait fish like shad, gizzard shad, threadfin shad running those banks, doing their spawning thing. You've got fish like crappie and bluegill that are moving up shallow into the shallower water near the bank that are either spawning or pre-spawn or coming off the spawn. Bass, the same way, they're coming off their spawn. There's a lot of activity up shallow now. So trying to hit that super deep water, that deep hole at the dam, that deep hole out there in the river channel, probably not the best thing to do right now. That is one of the things I would say to avoid trying. Avoid using stink bait. Avoid trying to hit that super deep water. There's going to come a time where that will come more into play. And listen, one thing to keep in mind, these are not absolutes everywhere you go and everywhere you fish. So depending on the body of water, the given day, if all you've got is a deep hole where you've got access to fish, maybe you're fishing off a pier or off a bank, you may be able to catch fish there. Go fish. I mean, you don't know what's happening in the dynamic, what's going on in your fishery. I'm just thinking, talking in generalities here as far as what you need to do, what you kind of need to think about. And, some stuff to keep in mind there. That's the biggest thing I would probably avoid, doing right now. The other thing is parking too long in one spot. I think we're into that time period right now where spending too much time in one place trying to wait out inactive fish is probably a bad idea. Most of the places I'm running into now, anchoring up, I'm there about 45 minutes, which is longer than a lot of running gun guys do. I'll give it about 30, 45 minutes. And generally speaking, in these areas, if fish are there. Sure, if you're marking some fish and they're inactive, you can wait them out. And, you may have to sit there for an hour and a half, and, hour and a half, you finally get bit. That can happen. But generally, the thing to avoid this time of the year, I would say, is too much running and gunning, or sitting in one place too long. A little more running and gunning is a positive thing. We sat in a place this morning for 2.5 hours. But the deal was we were catching fish every 20 to 30 minutes, and good fish. So when that's happening, it's worth sitting there and waiting. And what I do is we'll fish that, and once you hadn't got a bite in like 20 minutes, I'll set the timer for another 30, and if we don't get bit or catch a fish, we're up and out of there. So, it's okay to be patient, and it's okay to park and camp when you're getting hit, but if you have the ability in a boat or on the bank, even if it means moving your bait around, if you're on the bank and you can't really cover a big area. If you've got baits pinned down in a certain area, maybe you're fishing near the bank, you're not getting hit, put some stuff out deeper. Go 180 degrees in the other direction if you have that ability, depending on what the setup is where you're at. Down the road, what's going to happen here ahead of us in the next few weeks as we go into May? I think the fishing's going to continue to get good. It's going to get better and better. It's going to get more and more consistent. We will have ups and downs. One of the things I'm telling the people on the boat right now is, I've got people wanting to rebook trips already because we've had such a good little streak here this week. But it's like I tell them, bad bites don't last forever. When the bite's bad, it's not going to last forever. But neither do good bites. Stuff comes in waves, and I don't know why that is. It's rare that you see a bite just last for a month of great fishing. There's going to be ups and downs, ebbs and flows. So you kind of have to keep that in mind. But generally speaking, now is the time to be fishing up until sometime into May, into June. And that's when we get into that spawn zone. And it's always a nervous time for me booking guide trips because people are out of school then in June. They're wanting to go fishing. Kids are out. People got time off for work. They got vacation. And it's probably not the best time to go. And I let a lot of people are adamant about going that time of the year, and I'm very honest with them and upfront with them, and just let them know, hey, it may not be good fishing. So, if they have some flexibility, we'll try to reschedule them if it's like really hideously slow. But that's kind of the end game there that you're looking at going into the early part of June. And honestly, that's pretty much true around most of the country. A little bit of it's water temperature driven, but honestly, by that point, it doesn't matter. More of this spawn is driven by the amount of daylight that the fish have. That's kind of more their barometer than what the water temperature is doing. So, that's kind of what we're looking at. Rest of April, going into May, it's a good time to get out and fish. It's a good time to try out new gear, new techniques of fishing, because your odds of catching fish are pretty good. So if you've got something new you're wanting to try, maybe a new bait, some kind of new rig, man, it's a good time to be doing that and a good time to be out on the water. So that kind of encapsulates a lot of the fishing videos that I've done lately and will have out here in the coming weeks. The only difference is you don't get to see me catch any fish and see any of this stuff in play. But if you want to see any of that, obviously either subscribe here on the YouTube channel or go to the YouTube channel if you're listening to the podcast, and you can actually see some of this stuff in play. We've got some pretty good ones coming out. There's a couple of Flathead videos and some stuff with some different baits, some stuff with some bank rigs and all that kind of stuff, and try to do more podcasts. I have been extremely busy. It's been crazy work wise. It's with the guide trips, scheduling the guide stuff, creating the content for YouTube and dedicating the days to do that, and then a lot of the video production stuff we do, because I do that for a living also. I basically have 3 different little hustles here, and we create a lot of video content, marketing content for different companies and TV networks. So we got all that going on. So it's a juggling act, but I'm blessed by God above to be able to do what I do and to be able to juggle it, and hopefully I can keep on doing and keep that ball rolling, and hopefully you guys can hang around and enjoy it and maybe give you a little bit of food for thought that will help you catch some fish next time you're out there. So until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you out on the water.